Right, welcome to this video that I've called What I Think Games Workshop Should Do. I think it's a very important one, this one, and it's going to require your input, but I'll explain as we go along. And it's just really a video about what I think, as a fan of Warhammer 40,000 Games Workshop miniatures, what they should do next. So what direction they could go, and I think it would be a good idea to go down that route. So the current situation, I think Games Workshop are doing quite well. They've brought out 7th edition for Warhammer 40,000. Then they're updating all the codexes quite quickly, doing an excellent job. And then for each of those factions, they're sort of filling in the gaps. So there's new releases, not having to redo whole armies, but just where there were sort of gaping holes, they're filling them with these new releases and sort of polishing off each faction very nicely. Very impressed with the new codexes, new units. I mean, the sculpting of the new releases is absolutely superb. They're a joy to paint a lot of these miniatures. So, in my opinion, I think Warhammer 40,000 now is pretty well covered. Most of the factions have got the new codex now, and Games Workshop releasing, doing new releases, but it's all tying together quite nicely. Nice addition of the rules, and then all the factions being updated and covered pretty well. So then you've got Warhammer. I think it'll always be smaller than Warhammer 40,000, but I think Games Workshop have been doing quite well with that. Obviously, Warhammer 40,000 is the biggest. And then Lord of the Rings, or The Hobbit as it is now. I mean, that's done well, but I'd imagine that's going to gradually get smaller. As those films, as all 6 films have come out, then as time goes on, then I think the Lord of the Rings sort of side of Games Workshop will gradually get smaller. So I think we're looking at sort of a time here where Games Workshop could try something new, perhaps. I'm going to explain here what I mean, and what I think is very important is that you leave your feedback. And the reason for that is that I'm hoping this video will do quite well, and then perhaps those within Games Workshop may see it and may listen to the video, and then importantly listen to the fans as well and what you say, and see if you agree with this direction that Games Workshop could go down. I think you're going to find it interesting if you're new to, or you've only been doing Warhammer 40,000 or any of the Games Workshop different things that they do, 40k Warhammer, Lord of the Rings. If you're new to it, you'll find this video interesting, but also if you've been doing Warhammer 40,000 for a long time, then listen up to what's coming next. So I want to talk about Space Hulk. They re-released Space Hulk. They did a box set of it. It's sort of a cult classic, big fan base for it. Then back in 2009, I think Games Workshop re-released it, re-sculpted the miniatures, redid the board. It's beautiful box set they did. And then they've re-released it as well, due to demand. You can still get Space Hulk now. I'm not sure if it's still in stock on the Games Workshop website, but they did do a re-release of that edition. So what I'll talk about next is what I think Games Workshop could do. As I said, they're covering everything pretty well. 40k Warhammer, Lord of the Rings. So I think now is sort of a good opportunity for them to do a couple of other things. I'm not talking about totally new stuff, but to re-release or redo some of the other games that Games Workshop used to, that sort of fade away with time, but I think there's still a fan base for them, plus a new generation that would find them really interesting and really fun to play. I'm going to go through them here in the priority that I think Games Workshop should do them. And also for the comments, if you know of any rumours, I'm not going to go for any rumours here. If you've heard any rumours, then share that as well, about any developments with these gaming systems. So the first one, and you may have predicted I'm going to mention it, and that is Blood Bowl. So Blood Bowl is based in sort of the Warhammer time zone, and it's really just like American football, but with a Warhammer twist. You may have heard of it through the computer games that have been released for it as well. Just looking on the internet here, Blood Bowl's fantasy football game, created by Jervis Johnson for Games Workshop, and it's a parody of American football. Now, I only played this a couple of times, and it was back in the early 2000s. A friend of mine had the old game, and I really, really enjoyed it. Saying here the game was first released in 1987 and has been re-released in new editions since. It's set in an alternative version of the Warhammer Fantasy setting, populated by traditional fantasy elements such as humans, goblins, dwarves, elves, orcs, and trolls. So I'm going to go into too depth of a detail here, but it's like a two-player game, and it's saying here that the games would last between 45 minutes and sort of 2.5 hours. I know tournaments and things still run for Blood Bowl. I know there is sort of a cult following for it, and I think that's why, similar to Space Hulk, Games Workshop should re-release it. So they could do a really nice board for it. If you've seen the quality of the production of Space Hulk, they should do Blood Bowl to the same quality. Re-release all the miniatures in plastic, re-sculpt them. I mean, they could do some excellent plastic kits for those, and then maybe do the heroes that you can get or expansions in sort of blister packs as well. I think the older generation that remember it will really be glad to see it back again, and then the new generation coming up, I'm sure, will fall in love with the game as well. So it's like a plea really to Games Workshop that they really would re-release Blood Bowl. I think it's an excellent concept of a game, and it's just we're dying to see a new release of that gaming system. So again, leave your comments. What do you think about that? I think it's high time that we saw Blood Bowl come back. Next one I mention, and I remember reading the battle reports for this when I was collecting Games Workshop stuff when I was about 14, 15. This is the early mid-90s, and I used to love reading the battle reports, and that was for Epic. So you had Epic, and you had Epic 40,000 that came out later. There's different versions and box sets and things that came along. But Epic really, I'm going to bring up details here for you, for those of you who have not heard of it before, especially new generation. So Epic's a tabletop wargame set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Whereas Warhammer 40k involves small battles between forces of a few squads or troops or 2 or 3 vehicles, Epic features battles between armies consisting of dozens of tanks and hundreds of soldiers. Due to the comparatively larger size of the battles, Epic miniatures are smaller than those in 40k, with a typical human being represented by a 6mm high figure, as opposed to the 28mm miniatures used in 40k. In the Warhammer Fantasy Universe, so I'm just reading on here, it's talking about Warmaster. So they released a Warhammer version called Warmaster, and it's the same, it's just like a smaller scale version of Warhammer, but because it's smaller, you're able to field huge armies and all the monsters and things. But Epic really is the one that I'd have a keen interest in. Used to love reading the battle reports for them, and it gave you an opportunity to, when you play 40k Baneblade, it sits on the table, it's a big thing. But in Epic, you can have squadrons of 3 Baneblades, and you can have whole formations of them, and all the different Titans, and and the different airplanes as well that you can get, the jet fighters. I remember reading about those in the White Dwarf magazines I used to get, and I really liked, even just reading the battle reports, really liked the look of, and just the way Epic worked. So I think Games Workshop should go down the route of re-releasing Epic. Perhaps do it as like a big box set release. See how it goes from there. It's not Games Workshop to do anything risky that's a venture that's not going to work. But to re-release Epic So do like a classic box set, you know, like Imperial Garden Orcs or something, or Eldar, and then see how it goes from there. If the interest is there, then start doing expansion packs for different factions, box sets, and so on. But I love that idea. As you're listening to this, if you're not sure about these gaming systems, then just type them up on Google and look at the images, and you'll see what I'm getting at here. So I think they should re-release Epic. Definitely. Just another gaming system. One, Games Workshop, they must know that it works, because it was running for years and years. It's not risky. It's based on 40K. It's not a huge, different venture, different universe, different concept. It ties in nicely with the current 40K universe. So Epic is the one, another one that I think Games Workshop should do. And then I know they've done other different things. I would mention one more, because I've heard people talking about it, and that's Necromunda. Probably the least well known of those three that I've mentioned. Let's bring up some details for that. So Necromunda is a skirmish game. So it's like Warhammer 40,000, but it's a skirmish. In Necromunda, players control rival gangs, battling each other in the Underhive, place of anarchy and violence in the depths below the Hive city. It is a parent game of 40k, plays using the same scale miniatures and terrain, but in the Underhive, a heavily polluted underground industrial environment. Being a skirmish game, gangs are usually limited to around 9 models, but as a result, gameplay can become more detailed. Unlike 40k, Necromunda also allows players to develop their gangs between battles, gaining experience, gaining and losing new members or equipment, according to a set of rules. Gangs which frequently win games acquire more credits, money, and fewer injuries, and so are able to grow throughout a campaign. Rules-wise, the game draws heavily on the second edition of 40k. The rule set is commonly considered to be better suited for the type of skirmish games Necromunda encourages. Necromunda also stands out from most other games by Games Workshop by having a more three-dimensional table layout, with buildings generally having multiple floors, interconnecting walkways and bridges. The terrain is constructed to simulate a hive city on the planet Necromunda, a dystopian futuristic city resembling a termite mound many miles high. And there's different factions. There's houses of Hive, Primus, Orlok, Cawdor, Delaque, Escher, Goliath, Van Sar. There's other groups: the Enforcers, the Cult of the Emperor's Redemption, Pit Slaves, Ratskins, Scories, Spire Hunters, and then there's other gangs as well. I could go on and on about it, but it's like a skirmish game. It's saying here that it's 2 to 4 players. Playing time is about an hour, so it's sort of a shorter game. It looks a lot of fun. It's like taking Warhammer 40,000, doing a skirmish game, and then more detail added on top. So I think that's another concept that worked really well. And again, back when I was collecting 40k when I was 14, 15, 16, I remember Necromunda being featured, in pretty much every issue of White Dwarf at the time. So those are the 3 games. I think Games Workshop should bring them back. Not all at once, but should seriously consider bringing those back. As I said, I think there's a big fan base for all 3 of those. But the response to this video will help gauge that, I think. A lot of 40k players subscribe to the channel. And I know I've listened to your comments, and some of you have mentioned about some of these gaming systems. It's be interesting to hear how many of you are also interested in those games as well. So what do you think is the big question? Any rumours at all? Do you think Games Workshop are releasing any of these? Any rumours out there? Possibly that Blood Bowl's coming back, but I don't know anything for sure. Leave your comments. What you think of those gaming systems. Will Games Workshop bring them back? Should they bring them back? And then I hope the Games Workshop get to see this and seriously consider what's said and listen to the fans. I think if there's enough demand, then surely that justifies releasing or re-releasing these classic games. I don't want Games Workshop just to be 40k, Warhammer, Lord of the Rings, and then that's it, nothing else. I'm sure they've seen the success of Space Hulk. It's the most sought after game, and Games Workshop have other games that they could re-release that are, I think, almost guaranteed to do well. They've done well in the past, and if they're wise and go about it in the right way, there's no reason why new editions of these will be very, very popular indeed. So that's the video. If you're wondering about battle reports and so on for the channel, they're coming. Working on batches of stuff at the moment. But just this video here. Interesting to see your comments. Leave the comments below. And thanks for watching. And tune in next time.